Okay, this is the Gardner Board of Health meeting. It's Monday, May 19th, 2025, and it is 4:33 p.m. Meeting is, I'll make an announcement first. Any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium subject to reasonable requirements of the chair as to the number, placement, and operation of equipment used so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Any person intending to make such a recording shall notify the chair forthwith. All documents referenced or used during the meeting must be submitted in duplicate to the clerk of the board or committee. All documents shall become part of the official record of the meeting. Meeting is called to order. All members are present. First item on the agenda is review minutes from April 28th, 2025 Board of Health meeting. And I know we didn't have these ahead of time, right? These are the ones.
Yeah, sent out on Friday at like noon-ish.
Okay, I missed it when I looked again. Take a minute here to read them.
Yeah, I wasn't able to open it anyways.
Okay.
It'll just take a minute to look everything over.
How long is it? I just found one typo on page 4, under our legal public comments. They don't think the situation warrants and LSP instead of and LSP. Top paragraph.
Oh, it just removed the D,
Just
there
scratched.
goes the D there.
Yeah.
Good pickup.
Can I have a motion to accept?
I'll make the motion to accept the meetings for April 28th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Uh,
Okay. Some of these. Next item on the agenda is continuing with the well regulations, review and discussion on the draft Board of Health regulations for private wells. I know we started that last meeting.
So, yeah, did you want to kind of pick up where we stopped? There were some questions last time.
Yeah, the one clarification on the
Yeah.
400 feet thing. And
Yes, so that one was the first on my list.
Yeah.
So the 400 feet is just what we're requesting that they identify any sources of, or anything that could be like a fuel storage or an underground tank. The 250 feet is actually a setback distance. So that's a distance, it's a different distance where that would be, you have to set your well this far away. So we would be looking at potential issues further out than what the actual setback distance is at 250. I think that's on page 7.
Yeah, that's the other one. I don't know, yeah.
So anything kind of still in question, I did leave highlighted in there.
So is there anything before page 7 that's highlighted?
So, just trying to, was this latest version, the red was what was changed over to match the model rig, and then the highlighted now is what's been updated since then, or I'm kind of losing track of where we are with the revisions at this point?
Yeah, so this version with the red and highlighted on there, everything that's in red is what came from the
New regs?
And then anything in black is still little bits and pieces that we kept from the current regs. And then what I had highlighted was things that we either made a decision on or had a question on.
We're okay with section 9, the permit lasting for 2 years instead of 1, or 1 year instead of 2. Is that what we're looking at? On page 7.
There was, the first thing was a question, because there was a discrepancy between identifying all potential sources of contamination at least 400 feet out, when the setback distance is only 250 feet. So that would be a decision for the board as far as we want to match those two numbers or.
Sorry, which two sections is that?
Okay, I was looking beforehand.
That is my, yeah.
I was just going through the highlighted areas to start with, and this was before.
So you have the, you want me to get
Oh,
this
sorry.
one, that one, this one has page numbers and all
Okay.
that good stuff, so it'll be easier.
Okay, so we'll go with this one. Yeah, it's on page, page 6. The permits, we're going to go with the 1 year, they'll expire in 1 year.
That was what I put based on
Yeah.
the discussion.
Discussion,
Because we
okay.
had the option of doing 2 years.
So the highlighted areas, are they areas that we have to continue with making decisions on?
Those, I think, had already been decided, I was just
Okay.
highlighting them.
Page
just
okay.
came up last time.
Okay,
And then on page, the page you're on now?
8.
8. That was the first place where it was a question for today's meeting as far as if it wanted to just be a minimum of 5 gallons per minute, or did we want to make it more specific to the number of bedrooms in the house as far as the flow rate goes?
I mean, is that based on the new reg, the model reg, or,
Yes, that is.
I mean, it makes some sense, I guess, right?
Yeah, to keep it 2 bedrooms to the 5, 3 bedrooms to 7, and 4 bedrooms to 8 gallons per minute.
Yes.
That makes more sense to
That's
me.
from the model regs, yeah.
So that's 4 bedrooms plus basically anything 4 or above would be 8.
Yes.
But so what if you have like a big apartment building that came in, would these regulations, would they still apply?
Well, that would probably fall under like a public
Commercial.
water supply.
Okay, okay,
Because it's serving
okay,
more than a number of people.
okay. And we talked about that.
Mike, I'm sorry, what was you said there was a discrepancy between 400 and 250 or something like that.
Yeah, that's on page 7, under part 6, well, location and use requirements. Number 1 was we were requiring the applicant to plan on all proposed or potential sources of contamination up to 400 feet out.
Right.
When the setback distance for that is actually only 250 feet.
Is that item G there, where it says 250 feet?
Yes.
Okay, so that's,
So there was a question as far as why those numbers didn't match. So I'll just explain that the first part is just identifying potential issues up to 400 feet out. And then part G is actually the actual setback.
I think that's what we kind of decided that would
Yeah.
make sense, right, just so that there would at least be a heads up if something was.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we're back on to page 9. So the highlighted areas are what we decided.
So starting on part 6, this is where we had a question as far as all the requirements for testing and reporting if you sell your house or move. This is all stuff we don't have anything like that in our current regulations.
Yeah, was that something that you were gonna check with some other towns on how they handle it?
I just looked to make sure it's not like Title V where there's a state reg and it says the same thing and we would be like circumventing that, but there's not. So private wells there's no regulations, no state regulations for private wells.
Right, but I guess, what I was asking is, let's say that there's a transfer, I mean, every time there's a transfer of property, what's gonna happen if the testing is done? I mean, normally, again, that's kind of between the buyer and the seller as to what they want to remediate or what they're willing to accept for, especially like secondary levels that are above, where they should be or what the recommended levels are. So it seems like even the secondary criteria are all included in this, and if it exceeds that, are you saying like that in order for them to get the permit to be able to use the well upon transfer of the property, that what are we saying by requiring this?
I don't think we're just saying like we approve this well, and once we approve, it's in the property owner's hands.
Oh, you're saying, but by these regs, we can't approve it, say if it has high manganese or something like that.
It's only in the back on page 8, it's only those primary contaminants would be something that we would not issue a permit for, like if they have high arsenic or chloride, copper, fluoride.
Right, but I mean hardness and iron and manganese and so forth are not primary EPA contaminants, are they? Or
No, so we can definitely clarify between like a secondary and a primary contaminant. I can break it into two different categories or two different lists, so it's a little more clear.
I mean, I'm just kind of wondering how that's going to work logistically for if there's a sale pending. Is it going to be held up by virtue of a, you know?
A lab sample at a lab, something, what if there's a delay?
Or if there's a sale of a house and they do a test and it comes up with some of these contaminants, we would have no real way of knowing, like,
Right.
we're enforcing this, so I was,
It does say that it should be tested no more than 1 year from the sale or transfer of the property, so there is a whole year span of time where they can get tested and know ahead of time, but I just wonder if homeowners would be aware of that with.
Well, then I guess the question would be if it fails and they can't immediately identify how to remediate it, then they're stuck in some kind of a transition period without being able to use the water supply. Or
I was actually gonna recommend not including this whole section, just because of that reason, as far as the enforceability. This is a lot of requirements that we would have no idea if they're occurring or not, really, if it's a home sale. And we wouldn't wanna get, I think water testing is, certain mortgage companies require that, if you know they're on a lot, they'll ask for that.
I think the permit, the definition of what we issue now is new, right, compared to what we used to. So I think that was what I was kind of relating this to, is you have to be issued I forget what it was called, but
A certificate of,
Am I reading this
Low
wrong?
water supply certificate.
yeah.
This is like, this describes a new well, and then is this highlighted area what we test for on an existing well, or am I reading?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
that
yeah.
is correct,
So
so,
this whole stuff is really for a new well.
yes.
yes.
Whereas,
Those wells, that section, those homes already have a well permit and a water supply certificate, so it wouldn't take that away. It's more, I think the state is just trying to make sure new homeowners know what they're getting with a well and aren't inheriting like a problem, not as far as that goes.
okay. But it does say all other required chemical parameters listed in 8, but 8 is,
And that's to go with section water quality testing requirements on the new well.
I'm still on page 9, so currently we don't require homeowners to test at all. It's a recommendation that they do it every 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, and this is making it a requirement if we chose to adopt this under section 6.
Yeah.
My thought is maybe only for people who own rental property, because the tenants really have no kind of control over that and deserve to know, but every homeowner, I don't know. If we're going from every 2 years as a recommendation to an annual requirement, I don't know how realistic that is.
I think I brought that up last time too. It seems like,
Enforcement would be,
well, enforcement and also just the burden of having to
Monitoring
do that
it.
every single year. I don't know anywhere, I've never heard of that anywhere where an annual test would be required unless there was some pre-existing condition maybe that would warrant it, but, and even for a landlord, I think, every year, I mean, are conditions that dynamic that they would change generally from one year to the other?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it seems like a lot, but, I mean, again, it's obviously a primary concern that the drinking water is safe and that there's
Right.
nothing unsafe in it, but I don't mean to minimize that, but I'm just trying to, so, you know, whatever interval that we would suggest, it's not gonna be a guideline, it's gonna be a requirement, so what would the enforcement of that be exactly? Like,
That is a good question.
yeah,
Right. And so at the end, on page 10, the end 13, it just, can we just do like, an adoption of it being very general? The regulation requires that private drinking water wells meet all current Mass primary and secondary drinking water standards and guidelines adopted by the Mass DEP office. And blanket it with that instead of going with regulating specific testing before sales of properties. I think that's a lot that might hold up sales plus, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know I don't know how much real estate, you do a lot of real estate law, I mean, it's never been an issue before, right?
no, I mean, not like
No.
where you have a state requirement like Title V, that's, you know,
Right.
sales can't go forward without that being.
And I don't think there's not really a state a state law like Title V. I mean, would that be something that we could just adopt, a general?
Well, I think the thing with Title V is everybody's aware of it, regardless of where you're buying or selling property, it applies to all the cities and towns. But you're purporting to have different regulations as to drinking water from town to town, I think that would be probably a pretty cumbersome and complicated.
Right, because it's not a general law from the state like the Title V.
Correct.
So, I don't know that I would put all of those requirements in because, again, you know, we can't really enforce it.
And there's nothing, none of this is in the current regulations, this is all brand new, so.
I mean, is this something that we could,
Right,
Like
the
a-
rules that we have, yeah.
maybe an advisory could be issued, like for each, but then how would I mean, the city's not really on notice of all these pending, you know, it'd be nice if there was a standard advisory as to, water testing that the city recommends and everything that we could provide, but that probably wouldn't be
Maybe we
practical.
could put
either.
something on the webpage about the wells, or that there's an advisory of, you know, checking and testing. I mean, we are new wells, they're gonna be tested.
Yes. They won't get the water supply certificate until.
Right,
Yeah.
so this is in question of transferring the ownership of the well. So, I mean,
Or just follow-up testing for everybody every year, which
Right.
is a bit much. Anyway, this should be 8 instead of 7, this Roman numeral, and then it's on page 8. Because there's a 7 before it, and there's a 9 after it, so just a minor thing like that. Whatever. So can we write some language that's a little less,
or even, like I said, I mean, instead of having all of this information above, just require that the private drinking water wells have to have current, you know, just keep that statement in.
Yeah, so if we go to page 9, 6 and 7 are actually about rental properties. I don't know if you wanted to,
But it says every well used for drinking water, including those serving a rental property.
Right.
So it's, if we just wanna make it for people who rent,
No, we can really separate out the renters and from the owners.
Which subsection are you looking at now?
Page 9.
Subsection 6, it says the owner of every well used for drinking water, including
Oh,
those
yeah.
serving a property which is rented or leased, shall have water tested once a year, which that seems a lot for people who, it's their property, they bought it, they
Yeah.
need to keep up the standard of their own drinking water, but whether we need to enforce that every year, the way this
Right.
reads, it seems a little bit too
Yeah.
restrictive.
I mean, I can see for protection of tenants, like you're saying, maybe even if there was a requirement that it's done by, landlords once every 5 years or something, whatever, something reasonable that, maybe things could change over, and I don't know what that period of time would be, I'm throwing that out there, but,
But even the owner of a rental property, I mean, they're the owner, so they still have to have it tested on a, regular, every 10 years, is it?
10 years for all of this big list.
I mean, if they're renting, they should have,
But they have a 1-year requirement for the basic coliform bacteria, nitrates.
that's for
pH.
irrigations, right?
No, it says for renting any property that's rented or leased shall have the water tested once a year, and it says coliform bacteria, nitrite, pH, conductivity, sodium, and iron. All other required chemical parameters listed in 8, but this is 8, and it sounded like these are all required, but as Jeff pointed out, like the hardness and the iron, I don't think is a.
oh, so those, oh yeah, right. So some of those are only every 10 years according to this study, but, yeah, I think,
Every 10 years for the radiological parameters in 8.
So this number 6 is saying that every owner should test every year.
Yeah.
And I don't think, we can't really,
Is this for
if
the
we
state?
can't regulate it,
The state?
I mean, we can't monitor it, I mean, how are we gonna monitor that?
the only thing I
And
can think of
enforce
is
that.
with rentals, in that case, if we got a complaint where someone said, well, and the water smells funny, we
Yeah.
can go to the owner and say,
Right.
where's your required testing results?
well, I would think whatever the interval is, that's recommended or required, I think there should also be a provision in there, that unless there's some reason for the board to think that there may be some imminent danger of contamination, you can go inside of that requested interval and require it at a shorter period of time, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think if the board ever has reason to suspect there could be contamination, then that should be an automatic. I think that's within the board's authority inherently to require that anyways, regardless of the
Yeah,
regulations.
if you get a complaint from somebody and you go, just like any other housing complaint, you go in and you do it. But I'm not so sure about, putting it as maybe it's advised that this is done, because again, I mean, if we have it set up, but we have no means to really monitor or enforce that it's done every year, I mean,
It just doesn't, it seems,
I don't-
whether we could enforce it or not, it seems like too much of a burden on
Right.
homeowners
Right.
anyways. I don't know, I don't see any reason why you have to test once a year, but unless, I'm not a scientist and I don't know the science behind it, and if you told us that, yeah, it is, I guess, something that could change that rapidly,
I know a lot of people have wells and they do test every 1 to 2 years, but I would be more inclined to just put it as it's advised to, you know, even instead of putting it, it's advised to test for these things every year.
Yeah, instead of
Rather
shall
than
have its
it
water
being-
tested.
And, you know,
Yeah, I think the
Not
criteria,
Advised to have its water
the
tested.
required criteria should be in relation to the issuance in the first
Right.
instance of that permit.
Yeah.
Because we do have to have the regulations spell out what would be required to issue that permit. And then what goes on after that with homeowners in maintaining their systems and everything maybe could be more as an advisory. Unless, again, there's a reason for the board to think that there was, you know, pursuant to a complaint or something the board observed on the property or adjacent to the property that it would warrant another test, you know, something like that. Does that make sense?
and for the irrigation wells, it says the board requires annual testing for E. coli and nitrate and nitrates. Do we do that now, or we
Do
don't?
not.
That's new, right?
Yeah.
Do we have any irrigation wells?
There are a few, but we don't permit those or anything like that. It's just for watering the garden.
Yeah, I think I would be more inclined to write it all as an advisory and not do the requirement for selling and transfer and title. That's my opinion.
Either that, or if you require it on a transfer, I think it should just, well, yeah, no, I don't know about that. I think you're opening up kind of.
Where it's not a general law, I mean, Title V is general state law, so
Yeah.
it's all outlined and, you know, it's made clear across the board, but I mean, this just being a city regulation.
Yeah, well, again, in that instance, we could also advise that, you know, a test be done upon transfer without
Right.
it being I don't, you know, rather than taking it out of there completely, just make it
All
something
as an
that,
advisory.
yeah.
Okay.
And I, again, I would, you know, maybe if you said Fitchburg and Leominster have adopted this new reg, or,
So Pittsburgh did recently. and
But did
pretty
they
much-
make modifications
They
on
pretty
it?
much adopted.
The whole
Just-
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
okay,
One truck.
yeah. It's kind of cumbersome, it's tough, you know,
Yeah, I also had to look up what they mean by radiologic.
I
And
know.
it's radon and uranium, which are not even listed on this section 3 of paragraph 8, or section 8. So that probably should be clarified if we are looking for radiologic parameters, just reading section 8 would be radon and uranium, but I don't even know if the state has that in their.
Well, they're saying it has to be a Mass DEP lab, right? Certified lab, or EPA certified lab.
Massachusetts
Yeah, I
certified
guess,
lab for the following chemical and bacterial parameters.
The main reason I was looking to do the regs was actually just to add PFAS to
right.
So,
You know, that did occur to me too.
Yeah.
That's how we kind of got into this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
yeah, so we can definitely, it's okay to not take everything from the law regs.
Right. I mean, I think it's all good information as an advisory, but,
Yeah,
and we can write it up that way for renters and owners. And let, you know, let renters know, owners of rental properties know too, that it is something that they have to be aware of, you know, with their, for water and stuff. I just don't think that putting it in as a mandatory thing without it being a state-generated law that provides for provisions to for enforcement and regulating it and keeping track of it all, that would be like a lot.
but these sections we're concerned about, they don't replace any prior
Yeah.
language in the brief, so we're not like deleting some other protections we had in place. This is all in addition to what we had, so, yeah, I guess I'm less concerned in that respect if we make it advisory, as long as it doesn't conflict with any of the existing language that contain a requirement, you know, an outright requirement.
Is everyone okay?
And we add the
Leave that
PFAS, you know,
Did we add the PFAS?
Yes.
Yeah, it's down there, yeah.
And then we talked last time also about adding just some language about whatever the current, like, acceptable ranges are through these agencies, so I think
That's a
including
good
that
point.
will be helpful, because it might change over time.
Yes.
And also
Very
might
true.
give people an idea of what to expect. My other question though is if we turn this into advisory, we should probably have some parameters if results were to go outside of that range, what happens for somebody who already owns a pre-existing well? And is it required that they report that to us at that point?
I
Well,
think if it's an
DEP would
advisory, it
report
would
it
just be.
anyway, right? If it's through it.
I think they're pretty much hands off from private wells, so.
Okay.
That would just be the homeowner getting the results and having to report that to us.
It says the Board of Health may require the property owner to provide an alternative approved source of drinking water for their tenants. Like, is that what you're asking? Or someone who owns the well themselves and whether they don't have any requirement to remediate anything that
Or to
falls
notify
outside
In
that
any
range.
context, if they do this testing as advised and then a result comes back that's out of the acceptable range, then what?
They should report it to the Board of Health, but
Well, I would think if you have tenants and it's, you know, within the recommended or required time period to get the test done, and it's something, one of the primary areas of concern is in violation, then they should definitely have to report that. I guess, although, yeah, even if it's a private residence, if it's exceeding coliform or something like that, you know, you have to do something about it.
I mean, we can add that they report it to the Board of Health for help with, managing health concerns.
I can work on some wording for that, and we can revisit as far as what happens if you get an exceedance on one of these primary contaminants. So,
To cover all those issues.
Yeah, because if we have children, like,
Right.
yeah,
I think there should be something, but.
Yeah, it's a good point, and about the levels that are currently accepted ranges, because that's what we ran into with them changing.
I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole,
No.
but
Where are you?
I mean, that would certainly be a disincentive for anybody to test, because like with no test, they don't have to do anything. And with a test that fails, they have to immediately notify the Board of Health. I mean, the reason for testing should be because you're concerned about the health of the
Right.
people working there, living there, but, yeah.
They really put a lot more information in here. Are we okay with that? Then you can read that.
yeah, that's the tough section right
Yeah.
there, so this next section's a little bit technical as well.
Page 11.
Yeah.
I mean, this is per law, state law, but who can, it's just a matter of us adopting it, right?
Yeah, that just goes into, there's a state law certifying if you're gonna drill a well, it needs to be a state certified well driller. You wanna go down each number and just,
I mean, it's
mean, yeah, I'm kind of more inclined to just say, look, you're more familiar with the process than we are, and if there's anything in there that you feel like, it all makes sense to me as far as, those requirements, but is there anything that sticks out to you as being out of place, or do you feel should be more restrictive or less restrictive?
It's pretty clear in outlining how to design and covering the drilling of the well.
Yeah, this is more, I don't think, like if you're drilling a drinking well, this is how it's gonna be done. If the proper well driller is doing it, they're gonna be following all these
Right.
requirements, so it's not like we're
Yeah, it all
being excessive.
seems like it all makes sense. Does anything stick out to you as being,
Not on this section.
yeah,
The well casing. Yes. The ceiling and grouting, nothing that sticks out from what you know. On page 14, disinfection of the well, the well driller to disinfect his drill. And disinfect the well, that's all pretty clear. Only certified well drillers are authorized to physically alter or repair wells.
On E, who's responsible for sending the sample and collecting it? Is it the driller or the homeowner?
I believe that is the well driller who's supposed to collect that, the very first sample, so we can clarify that.
Do we have any decommissioned or abandoned wells in the city? I know we asked that last time.
Yes.
We have a few, you said.
There's probably a few that I can go into there's a state well database, so all wells go into, and you can tell if it's been decommissioned, but I do know of some.
So the language on the decommissioned wells, it's a lot more than what we've been doing. Does it all follow suit with reasonable language on what's required?
As far as I know, yes. It's basically just making sure that a well is decommissioned in a way that it doesn't get used, again, is capped properly and sealed properly.
And safe, yeah.
And then, so that the state and the Board of Health knows that it's a decommissioned well, so that it comes up, we'll have a record of that.
And how would the owner typically notify the board or the health department of decommissioning?
We have not historically been notified at all, so this is all new stuff, so that would be a good question.
I feel like maybe like a form on the website. Maybe.
Okay.
Okay. Is it electronic or?
When's the last time public water was,
One time in 7 years ago, and
yeah,
The whole capping of the well and everything, that is pretty reasonable with what needs to be done.
Yes.
Okay, enforcement.
yeah, I guess, you know, the penalty section, again, if we didn't have just advisory on that other section, then technically anybody who didn't test their well once a year, every
Right.
day, it's a separate violation. I think that's kind of, would be pretty tough to enforce.
The language for the hearing is pretty standard.
Do you know when Fitchburg adopted this?
Just
It
a
was
few months
in,
ago.
yeah, like in the fall.
Yeah.
maybe,
Do we know
last
how
year.
it's going?
I can ask.
Okay.
I think did Lemonster too, maybe?
I'm not quite sure, I will find out.
The language for the appeal process, the penalties. The information for the variances, is that all pretty standard from what? I mean, it looks like the reading, the wording of it is pretty clear of what they can ask for as a variance. The severability and that language as far as if it's, one portion of the regular, that's pretty standard, right?
Yeah, it's a standard contract provision, it's in almost all contracts.
So when there's a number 19
Um,
there, right on page 19, is that the number?
Yeah,
then a copy from the model regs at the bottom of the page.
Oh,
and
yeah.
19, into the next page.
any other questions or discussions? We'll wait till next meeting, and once we go through that little section, then maybe we can vote on them at that point. Or we have to have a public hearing
So I was thinking we'll go through all the revisions till we're satisfied,
Okay.
and then the following meeting we'll add it as a hearing.
We have to have a public hearing, just, to put it out there for any other input, and then we can vote on it that meeting, so it's 2 meetings from now. Okay.
So we could, is that something we'd be able to take a look at? Maybe you can shoot like a draft over to us or something so we can.
Yes. So
So
with the short turnaround with last meeting and everything else, I didn't get a chance to do that, but that's
That's
really
okay.
the plan, to get you a clean copy so you can read it well in advance and make notes and everything.
With maybe just a tracking of the most recent, I don't know how many colors you're on.
Figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know if this will be coming to with a new email too, I don't know how to get on and check
Did
that.
you get information on getting a new email?
I just gave like the name that I've got to use
Yeah,
for
I
the
haven't
account, but I
gotten
don't know
anything.
how to get on, like,
I haven't gotten any.
So I have asked, and they should be sending you instructions to
my old
the
email.
email we already have for you, your
Okay.
personal email.
Okay,
Once
I haven't
that's
seen
set
it.
up, I don't think it's been set up yet. so
Okay, want to make sure I didn't miss.
Yeah, I haven't been getting anything either, so.
They should send that to your email we have on file for you.
Okay, thank you.
And then once we do get those new emails, we can get them changed on the webpage again.
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is transfer station fees. Review and discuss on transfer station access and disposal fees.
So I just finished working on this today as well. So, and these are kind of just a list of current ticket fees and what I would propose as an increase. The revenue for the transfer station does not cover all of the expenses by quite a good margin. So I just wanted to try and close that gap a little bit. And I also did some comparisons with neighboring towns as far as what rates they have and match ours, and we're definitely on the low end for every county.
Currently, our yearly pass is $20, any size vehicle, right?
That's just to get into the transfer station.
Right.
Is the access sticker.
And that's for the year.
Yes, that's for
It is very reasonable.
fiscal year.
So we're proposing to go up to $30 for a car? No,
$30 for the sticker.
for the sticker,
Yes.
okay. And then the prices below for a car, SUV, 6-foot, 8-foot truck, that's if it's full of things to deposit at the transfer station?
So where it says car, SUV, 6-foot bed, 8-foot bed, that's the generic trash volume loads.
Okay,
So they kind of measure it by a car load, an SUV load, if you have a 6-foot bed, 8-foot bed, or similar length of trailer, and it's completely full, it'll be that amount. And if you're not in a full load, then you kind of eyeball it by cubic meters, so it's about $5 for a cubic meter.
and people go to the Board of Health and purchase the tickets for that cost ahead of time?
Yes, they can go online or come into the office and buy the pass and stickers.
And then appliances, electronics, so that's
Per piece of.
per piece.
Yes, so for like a computer monitor, it would be $20.
And then
For
another
TV,
TV,
yeah.
another $20. And upholstered furniture is $20 per item. Well, you want to raise it from $15 to $20 per item. right?
Yes.
And mattress box springs, 20 to 25.
That's
I want
each, right? Not
Yes,
set.
per piece.
Per piece, okay.
But if they're contaminated or wet,
So that's something new we're dealing with, that we can't get contaminated or wet, or just really destroyed mattresses, can't go to raw material recovery. We'll have to contract with another company who can grind them up, and that is about the cost of what it would cost
Okay.
to get rid of those.
and that's $60. Wood furniture, so this is $10 is what the current rate is, and then go to 15 per item. Tires, $5 to $8 per tire.
And that is pretty much exactly matching where our cost is with Bob's tire.
And the fluorescent light bulbs, keep those at $2.
Yeah, I didn't really have a change on those.
And the pay-as-you-go bags, pay-as-you-throw bags, keep them at $3.50.
That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
So most of these proposed prices are, they're not, like, none of them are exceeding some of our costs or anything like that, or,
Like, the mattresses would be a little bit, and then it's factoring in the transportation costs a little bit, and handling costs. But everything else, it kind of matches what it costs us to get rid of, so.
and so these, different vehicles, it's kind of like a guideline really, because like, I mean, is it rare that the vehicle is filled to capacity, or people usually end up taking?
It's usually not, so it's
Yeah.
usually, you got the back seat full, so.
So it's basically kind of like, case by case kind of estimate, pretty much based on those guidelines.
Right.
But it's not just like a car trunk, it's like a car trunk and the back
It's
seat
the one that's
and
full.
whatever you
Yeah.
have in your
Yeah.
car, okay?
Yeah.
And that does, I mean, if it's like recyclable things, you just bring it down, we don't have a charge for that,
We do
except
have,
for the car.
you have free yard waste,
Right.
any kind of metal objects are free, string lights are free, so we do have quite a few free items.
With the yearly pass.
With the yearly pass, yeah.
So I'm confused with these, the ticket,
Oh.
these two numbers for 24 and 25, why is 25 so much lower?
Partly because we're not through it all the way yet,
Oh,
so it's
okay, that
fiscal
makes
year,
sense.
and then it looks like it's just, we're slightly lower in general. So I don't see. But I can definitely run the numbers again as soon as we hit July 1st.
And are the proposed still on the low end of what you looked at, or is that more like the mean of what you saw in other cities and towns?
That is still on the low end. I still want to encourage people to put stuff in the trash instead of the roadside and stuff like that, so it's kind of trying to facilitate that, but also making up the gap with revenue versus expense.
So, do we want to make someone want to make a proposal to accept, to increase the fees?
I can make a motion to increase the fees as written here, and the effective date would be when? July 1st, is it, or,
Yeah, I think we would do July 1st.
okay. That's the motion.
Second.
All in favor, or any discussion further? All in favor? All, no? Oh, you said aye.
No, I still
Oh, okay. So I don't believe, it's not regulation, so I don't believe we have to have a hearing on raising fees.
I believe you're right.
updates.
Alright, so underneath the well regulations were the copies of the last two annual monitoring reports, the summary sections. So we did get this year's
Do we have
ground.
any extras
Oh,
we can give?
yeah.
At least if they can share one.
This file. See if that's down
Oh, do you already have a copy or?
there. Yes. Thank you.
Well,
One more copy if anybody? So I can just summarize
Mhm.
the results as far as the 1,4-dioxane goes. I'll just go down the list. We had 5 wells last year that were in exceedance, or 4 wells and a surface water that were in exceedance. So well number 7 last year was 7.08. For this round, it went down to 1.89. Well 13B last year was 8.16 and went up slightly to 8.7. Well 14B was 1.46 last year. It also went up very slightly to 1.87. 96D went from 8.09 to 8.21. And then we had the surface water, Mr. Russo's property. Last year that was 5.41. This year was not detected, or at least not detected above 0.139, which is the lowest limit that the test can actually get to.
so the other wells,
So one well went way down,
I'm just trying to see.
and then the rest of the wells kind of stayed almost the same.
Which is the well that went way down?
That would be 7, which which one in the
Here, if you don't look at it.
So if you look at this one is the 2025, the very last pages are, this one shows where groundwater moves,
Okay,
the direction of flow. This one shows all of the well locations.
okay. And where's the, okay, so where's the surface water, Mr. Russo's?
So that's actually, that seems that's the surface water, it's not here, but that's down.
Is that down like this area?
Yep.
And the one that was in a higher rate, is that the one directly coming off the UK where there's been erosion?
I don't actually know.
Okay.
So, most of these are so similar, you really consider it to be no change.
There's still an exceedance.
Yes,
But-
and that's 0.3.
I mean, it not being detected in Mr. Russo's pond makes, it's kind of consistent with what CEC was saying about the flow of the runoff, that it was going north and not in that direction. Is that? Do they give an interpretation of?
That's that first couple of pages is their and a summary and interpretation of the results.
It says tables, but I don't see any tables.
There's
Yeah,
like
I don't either.
there's like 100 pages of tables, so.
Okay,
I-
just
I
table
kept
1,
that.
2, and 3, summary of monitoring results, which is water monitoring. I'm just looking at the last page, inclusion, signatures, and attachments. It says figures for the sampling locations and then tables for the summary of the results.
Summary of the results is actually written in the writing in those paragraphs, yeah.
It's just harder to digest.
So like I said, there's over 100 pages of tables and test results.
So there were slight increases in the testing levels of PFAS, is that correct, or from last year, or?
Very slight, so the two of them went from 8.16 to 8.7 and 1.46 to 1.87, which according to CEC is not really a significant amount of change.
And is that kind of where we're at in terms of it's normal to expect these levels to be kind of on a slight gradual rise based on?
I would say that we don't really know, that's just kind of could be a seasonal fluctuation or what, so what we'd be looking for is like a really big, like doubling or tripling of something instead of just a couple decimal points.
And what would be the explanation for the surface water going from?
Not detected.
There is not really an explanation as far as that goes.
Mhm.
So I have theories, but I don't want to speculate.
What was the prior reading?
It was, last year was 5.41. So it could have been the amount of snow we got, I don't really know. There's not a definitive answer.
And that's on the 1,4-dioxane. Was anything else in exceedance that was tested that?
Everything else was in line with historical levels.
There was 13D that's gone up and it's still in exceedance. It seems like that's where the arrows are pointing to that one. The other one's over here. And then I'm trying to find the other ones that you mentioned down there.
Number 7 is off the grid a little bit, it's like see way
Oh.
up here towards the top line.
So it's not really on the map.
It's right under one of your fingers. I think.
Oh, way up here, I'm sorry, yep, okay, and then 14, is it D or B? I thought I said B, but maybe it's 14.
14D.
D, okay, so that's over here, and that's also impact, and then the surface water, you said, is 5.4, oh, that was the first one, I thought in previous year, okay.
So, I mean, from what I remember, the CEC was saying that's more consistent with the flow of presuming it's coming from the capped landfill. That that's where it's flowing.
Where was that?
The runoff with that was contaminated.
This arrow right here is kind of groundwater movement. So it's kind of how the water flows.
They didn't have any interpretation as to,
No.
I mean, are they looking at this kind of on a macro level in terms of multiple years of trends and that type of thing? But there's nothing from year to year that they raised any significant concern over?
No, and we do have historical results from when they first started that I can go back and take a look looked at. I think some of those were actually higher, like in the 15 range, somewhere in there, so I can kind of put a chart together for that.
Yeah, that would be good. I do remember there was one that was 15, and then one that was 20 way back.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
No, I will, do you have any questions?
Can I finish?
Oh, yeah, you can, and then we can do that, okay.
So, food establishments, we haven't really had anything out of the ordinary. I think we had one foodborne illness complaint that we couldn't find anything to raise alarms for that. For housing and nuisance inspections, it's definitely getting busier, especially with nuisance and grass. It's gonna start getting a lot of those here real soon. I think we had one condemnation in the last month. And we are also,
Was that a home or an apartment?
that was a privately owned home.
Okay.
So we are also finally going to be taking, or at least getting the owner of 266 Rear Pleasant Street into court to try and get that property cleaned up. That's the one that's kind of right behind EP and Duncan there. So that's been a problem for a while, so we're hoping to get some progress on that. And then prevention updates. Let's see. So she's working on an AED dance fundraiser called Diamonds and Daffodils.
Oh, yeah, that was already,
Okay, so that's already happened.
yeah.
I know she's working on the National Night Out planning. We had the school health and wellness fairs, the Purple Paws fundraiser took place, and I think it was a good event. She's still working at the schools on a daily basis, and as well as GCAT, which kind of gets into National Night Out, teen safety training, domestic abuse, GAMPA, all the local organizations. And that is all I have.
Okay. Any new business? Any questions or comments from the public?
Alan Russo, 2 Betty Spring Road, also landfill abutter. Thanks for reviewing the results. I'm waiting for those to come out. And I just want to get a couple of clarifying questions. Has CEC or Mass DEP commented in detail on these results, or is it just what's in the report?
As far as I know, it's just what's in the report.
Okay.
I don't have any other comments from Mass DEP yet on this year, or I'll look and see if we have anything from previous years.
And second question I have is have the exceedances been reported through the Massachusetts contingency plan?
Yes.
They have, so these exceedances have been reported to them.
Yes, that is part of CEC's responsibilities to do the reporting, so that went straight to DEP.
We didn't talk about the leachate pump repair updates. I know it's on the agenda, so maybe I'm circling back to something.
I probably interrupted you.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
I'm glad we did the test results, but we didn't cover that one. But my question on that would be the fact that the pumps are not fully functioning. My question is what is the environmental impact of that? Or what is the, let me be more specific, what is the impact to the leachate collection system itself when the pumps are not pumping? All the pumps are not pumping.
I will have to look up an answer for you and I can get some more information on that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I mean, I was glad to see the results with the fund. My property didn't increase phenomenally, but I'm not satisfied that we're doing everything we can do here, all right? We did 2 tests for the 1/4 docks end last year, because it was the first time we had tested the low level. I think the first round in those 4 wells in my pond came up with exceedances. So we ran another test immediately after, kind of like, is this correct? And they both popped exceedances again in that repeat. My pond, a year later, is showing it's not showing an exceedance. It's saying less than a certain amount. I'm not sure what that means, but it's saying not an exceedance of 0.3. But that's only one shot. It's only one test. So, just like last year, we ran 2 to verify it was correct.
I am actually
You already asked?
talking to DEP right now as far as whether they want us to do a second round or not. So
Thank you.
I'll have an update for you on that.
Thank you.
I
So,
think it's understandable, that, like, how did it change so quickly? And do
right, well,
we
you already
need to
asked that
verify
question.
this?
Yeah, is this normal? And I don't know what's normal. And again, my overriding concern from last year, middle of the summer, was, are we being proactive enough on this issue? I'm not sure what DEP is doing, but are we being proactive? I went to the February presentation by CEC, and I heard from the LSP there explaining groundwater flows and things, and we don't have, if I had a letter in here from that gentleman that says everything's honky-dory, or maybe we ought to do more, he's the LSP, and I think I heard at the last meeting, well, we don't need a separate LSP because CEC, our contractor already, they have an LSP. But if we don't pay for him to do something here, I'm not sure he's going to inject anything. That's a question. So I appreciate the board reviewing all this. And you're not chemical engineers. Nobody here is, I don't think, qualifies as a chemical engineer or scientist in this field. So that's why I think it's important to have an expert that's advising here and being as proactive as we can here with this particular situation. My concern is finding the extent of the contamination, finding the source of the contamination, stopping the source of the contamination so we know it doesn't get worse. And
Does your pond have like flowage into and out of, like a stream that flows into it or anything like that?
Springs.
Just springs?
Spring fed.
So it'd be odd for like these chemicals like take forever to, I mean, if they're in the water, and there's water isn't exiting the pond, it seems kind of odd that it would go from a certain level to not detectable in a year, doesn't it? Like I don't know how that would, does it get into the ground? Does it leave the water? I'm really not sure what the chemical explanation would be for that, but it's...
Well, the other thing that occurred to me as I was reviewing the notes of the minutes from the February meeting, the CEC gentleman was explaining groundwater flow. And you can see that in this report too. He talks about the monitoring locations being down gradient. He labels all the wells down gradient and surface water to the north. Cross gradient would be things like 96D, which is kind of, I guess, between the sludge landfill and the solid waste landfill. And then up gradient would be my pond to the south, which is the surface water location. So the thought that occurred to me was, well, when was that groundwater study done? And is it possible the groundwater flows could change? So even his assumption that, well, you got 3 of those wells on the north, you got one between the 2 landfills, which is further south. And Micah did a great job mapping these out. You can see him on that photograph again. And then you get mine to the south. Is that still accurate, those flows? Which again, I think, questions to be asked and advice from an LSP as to what the changes could be there. Because maybe we can't make those assumptions still.
But those must come
Thank
from
you.
studies beyond just the landfill, I would think, right? I mean, that's not, those groundwater flows are not just based on site of our landfill, it must be
Right.
various properties,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know
That's
how
kind of
current.
geological
Right.
information that I don't really know how it gets put together.
Hey,
I have a question on summer coming and what's happening with Dunn's Pond and what happened in testing there. Is there any prediction for what's happening there this summer?
so that's state testing, and it is one of many ponds throughout the state that is gonna be closed. I don't know, is it currently been tested yet? No. I know last year there were quite a few ponds in the state that were closed because, what's the bacteria?
There's cyanobacteria,
Yeah, cyanobacteria.
which is, usually you can see it in the
Right,
water,
right.
and the lab usually tests for coliforms. So if it goes above a certain threshold of coliforms, then it gets shut down for swimming as well, so. But Dunn's Park is a state,
Yeah,
it's kind of their own entity, so they do the testing and reporting and closure all independently.
I'm not sure what the current, I know that from different meetings and conferences and so, you know, because of state cutbacks and stuff, I'm not sure what that's gonna mean for us, but, they should be out testing it soon.
Just started.
We
Yeah,
just did the first round for tests.
okay,
So there are no closures reported on the state reporting website as
Not
of today.
okay.
It's usually a little later in the season.
This
Yeah.
needs to be
Usually,
marked.
yeah.
I know last year there was many state facilities that were closed because of the same thing, and I'm not sure what it's gonna mean this year. And you'll be testing pools and swimming pools. and-
Swimming pools, we only require one test before we permit them for the season, unless we suspect something else is amiss, but bathing beach will test every
Every week,
week,
Yeah.
so
really in
a
September.
lot more can happen there.
I have a question about the pool. I'm a butter to the Greenwood Pool, and I got a letter saying that there's going to be, the big building's going to be torn down, and I don't know how that will affect the water in the swimming pool with the dust or material that comes from the tear down.
That is a good question. I think they're gonna be, do you have an answer?
Well, I have an idea for you, that the pool has not yet been built for the season, I don't believe.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's full.
Okay,
Well, I would imagine it would be covered and, during demolition, they're not gonna have, are they gonna have ongoing operations while they're tearing that building down?
The pool doesn't usually open till the day after school closes for the year, and so I don't know the schedule of the demolition, so that was a concern of mine.
Would that have come through DPW or?
no.
I
The
actually
schedule
don't know
didn't,
what's been
yeah,
done
the
yet.
schedule was supposed to happen prior to the pool opening, so that all the construction debris has been removed prior to the pool opening, was what the plan was. I can follow up with community development with that if you'd like.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay, set a meeting for the next date.
Excuse me,
I'm gonna be,
did you say anything about the pumps? Did you address that? Did I miss it, about the pumps that were done?
Were you looking for an update on that?
Yes.
So the only update we have is that we're getting a brand new estimate put together. So that is still moving ahead.
And for how many pumps?
Oh,
So you're gonna replace how many total?
6 pumps.
6 pumps. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at June.
I'm away the 23rd, but I don't know if it can go to the 30th, if anybody else.
I don't think I'm around the 30th.
so